listening to the questionnaire.
Say that again.
You're listening to the questionnaires.
I've just started.
Right here, for your ears, for your eyes.
The questionnaire.
Get your comic on.
Poke it up, poke it up, poke it up, poke it up.
Doomed planet. Desperate scientists. Last hope. And a kindly quest, y'all. Yeah, this is the questionnaire, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Unknown Factor, a.k.a. that Wade Wilson of hip-hop. But as per usual, man, we're talking comics, you know. Even though, kind of the conclusion, sometimes over on this show, it ain't just comic books anymore, man. I mean, we're playing freaking D&D, you know, and that's just bizarre, I think, sometimes. But that's neither here nor there, man, you know. And we got Shiro's over there as well as Dave, which is two of our co-hosts, joined by Ellen Henry and someone else that will be addition on our fourth, maybe fifth session. There might be one really short fourth session. I don't know. I have to converse with Hannibal. But you know, like I said, Shiro and Dave over there, two of our co-hosts, are playing D&D. One of our co-hosts that's not playing D&D but loves to color. Yeah, Vladimir Popov in the house. How you doing, man?
Hey, everyone. I played D&D before, just not on the show.
But you're not playing D&D on the show, man.
Well, we'll figure out something.
You're not.
I'm the invisible bard, you know. Like I come in.
Hey, firstly, I'm the
2d8
bard.
dice and move on.
No, I'm the bard, man. Go figure. It's the musician.
I'm the invisible one.
Right.
You haven't heard.
Look,
That's why I'm not on D&D.
This
You don't
is
see
a
me.
conversation that has to involve Hannibal, Vlad. We'll deal with that later because that's other things, and there's a lot going on in this quest. I hope you all are keeping up, man. Like I said, we've had some great guests that have just dropped. I'm in the middle of editing a bunch to catch up to where I can get to editing this, so all of it gets out because, you know, we got to get it, man. I hope you all are enjoying it, though. It's, like I said, season 2's been phenomenal. I think it's probably like getting close to episode 60 within season 2. This is like 50. It's the high end of the 50s, man. I'm not exactly sure which. Right. But, you know, we've had
Age of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a number of different creators on here that do a number of different things, man. From writers to artists, colorists, editors, letterers. We've had voice actors. We've had mocap actors and stuntmen. We've had actors. We've had I don't know, man. It's a long list, right? And a couple of those share something in common. A lot of them are teachers. Now, we've never had someone, though, that specifically chose to look at comics and go, I'm going to make this a teaching vocation. Jason DeHart, man, I love that. Firstly, Jason, I have to say.
Thank you.
Because something we've discussed profusely on the show is the fact that comics have a tendency not to be viewed as the literature they are.
True enough. They have a varied reputation, one might say.
But they're progressing to be seen as a serious medium these days, especially for the past several years after the pandemic.
It's very true. It's funny to see the progression. I'm curious, Jason, man. What's your age, man?
I am 42.
All right, look, you got two on me.
Almost the meaning of life. The meaning of life is 41. I'm just a little past that.
Oh, you're the meaning of life from the Hitchhiker.
Yes.
No.
The Guide to the Galaxy.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there as well. 42 is the answer?
Yeah, it is 42, Jason.
Oh, it is 42? I thought it was 41. Yeah. Well, here I am.
Yeah. You are.
You unlocked it.
So, with that in mind, give us the answer to a question that I've asked many of people on this show, right? And we're going to take it just a step deeper because, you know, what you do, what you study, the books you've got out, and everything else included, right?
Sure.
Why do you think so quickly initially comics weren't taken seriously, especially based on where they actually stem from as far as they started ostensibly as political cartoons, went on to more of a medium to where they were noir, what we would call noir, and nowadays anyways, and pirate and horror stories, and then they ended up going to more superhero books once the introduction of Superman, and then the expansion of all of that, which is extensive, and I'm not going to go into all of it. Look up your history if you really want to know, y'all. There's a lot there. All right. To, the twist in the 90s, I'll call it, to where you had more independent creators coming out. They started making more adult-oriented or teen-oriented comic, to the point where we are now, to where you have everything from My Little Pony to, Ed Brubaker's The Body Was Left, which is clearly one end of the spectrum and the other. Unless we're going to include like hentai tentacle things, and then I think that's one step past Ed, but that would about be the only thing past The Body Is Left as far as adult content, if you could ask me.
Yeah. So why the reputation? Why the downgrade?
Well, and what changes do you think society looked at when they seen those changes throughout that span of history, man? As far as, because like I said, initially they pretty much started off as just political comics, which I think were something that adults viewed, and they viewed as a source of political humor in a way to lightly look at something that was real world. And even though they've technically always been used for that, right, there was a point where they became more of a children's thing. So why do you think they flipped to that? And then why do you think they stayed for that so long and then are slowly starting to flip back now?
Yeah. I think it's a political question. I think there are lots of places in the world where comics are regarded as art and in a more equal footing, but there's this guy named Frederick Wortham. That's right. That might be my new favorite curse word. He wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which sounds like a trashy romance novel, but it's not. It is an indictment on comics as this sort of incendiary, oh my goodness, look at what they're giving our kids to read. There's EC comics, there's sex, there's violence, it's HBO. Oh my goodness, there's all of this not safe for work content. And so from there was the establishment of the Comics Code Authority and all of these steps to make comics this constrained for children medium, which it was for many years. So people in society go, oh, hey. Yes.
Because I know the next step is going to take us into the comic book world. But before you step past that particular, so you think it was political, because do you think that they seen that comics were being used in a political nature to mock politicians?
I think that's definitely part of it. I think that when you're looking at that period of time, comics in the United States were being used as like World War II propaganda. I mean, Captain America punching Hitler in the face. But all of a sudden, they're being used as propaganda to say, hey, maybe nuclear stuff is bad and maybe we should be inclusive. And also, what about this? And I think that when you start to sort of move in those directions, it makes people a little uncomfortable. And I think that, we're talking about the era of McCarthyism. We're talking about the era of Red Scare. Let's control the message. Let's make sure that we have more of a dominant voice. So I think there was definitely some of that was part of the culture. And it's been slow to change. It's been slow for people to look at comics in a new way, because I think that became kind of a fixed mindset approach to the medium. Here's this medium. We put them in, gum for kids, and then they're supposed to be, for kids, but they're actually really sophisticated documents, really sophisticated multimodal ensembles that can communicate a wide range of meaning. It's not easy to make a comic, from what I've been told.
It's not.
That's yeah.
It's I can tell you this from conversations with numerous creators at this point. It is something that it takes a lot, because I don't think people understand, especially if you're looking at like a Marvel or DC book, how many hands one book passes through to get to the shelf. You know what I mean? And when I say that too, I'm not even talking about the hands that are printing it, or I'm not talking anything past that final editor where they hand it off to somebody. You know what I mean? Just sent printed. But the hands before that final edit is handed in, I mean, there's 8 minimum, I would say, at the big two, like minimum, any book they're pushing through, and it's probably closer to a dozen, to be real honest. That any title for Marvel or DC is like, there's probably a dozen people before it's like, all right, send it to print, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and then you got the smaller publishers. So, and if you're handling it yourself, then, and I mean, we've had creators on that have done this.
It's around 10. It's around 10 people.
Is all right. That sounds about right, Vlad. But you know, if you want to handle it from concept to pretty much everything, and like I said, we've had a couple people that handle pretty much all that, but even they typically at least have an editor involved in that process. You know, I think Declan's a perfect example of that with Old Dog that he did recently. But then it is more of a labor of love, and it's also something that you're not getting it out as quick, because why would you?
How could you even? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not feasible.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about a page that we read today in my class. I'm reading this with high school juniors, and we're looking at one of the opening pages of Superman Birthright. Mark Waid worked on, and multiple hands were on. And there's this page where, like, there's a match cut, and I pulled up some images of film to show what a match cut is in film. We were looking at, like, spaceship bullet, spaceship bullet, spaceship bullet, and on the next page, Kal-El's hand is reaching for the bullet, which is, on the one hand, this sort of like narrative move from the intro to the next part of the story. So it's necessary for that reason. And then it's also this callback to the fact that he's faster than a speeding bullet. So it was very appropriate that you were reading from a Superman book as we were opening the episode. The thing is, we look at that for like 30 seconds and we're like, okay, yeah, okay. Or we spend a little more time on it. But to think, okay, as the writer, you took the time to conceive of that. You're hearkening back to the history of the character. You're creating a narrative move from one part of the story to the next. And then as the artist, the inker, the colorist, you're taking time to detail that. And I always try to get that across to students, to anybody I could talk to about books. Every choice that is made on the page is intentional, and with comics and with a lot of forms, it's very time consuming. So it's not something you can always just breeze by. I know we can kind of go quickly by it, but sometimes it's worth pausing and just kind of appreciating a little bit more deeply.
I sincerely wish I had more time to appreciate but I run this show. So sometimes it's like, look, man, I got 6 books I want to read, and I know I got this amount of time, and I'm going to get through these 6 books, and then, one will really make me pause, and I'll only get through 5, and whatever. Maybe 4 sometimes.
True enough.
But you bring up an interesting point about controlling the narrative and how that's done. I think a lot of people don't think about that, the importance, and this is why I've got a 2 pan-cons I've still got to plan out. We're going to get them done, which is storytelling from one, the writer's perspective, and then the artist as well, because you have to understand within a comic, in most cases, you have 2 different people telling the same story. And I think that's another aspect I don't think people think about as much as they do, because even if and you can go back to the when we had Fabian with Eric on, we had an in-depth conversation about this. Like if you script what's referred to as the Marvel way, which still messes with me, because Marvel would not let you script the Marvel way. Like I don't care who you are, they're not going to let. They told Fabian not to script the Marvel way, and Fabian was around when they were doing the Marvel way initially. You know what I mean? But it's like, no, we want a full script. Like
it's not a functional script,
huh?
It's not a functional script. It was done 40 years ago by Stan Lee and the guys, because that was a 2-man team now, and those were just the simple monthly issues. There was no Marvel Universe, there was no movies, there was nothing outside of the comics, so it was okay. Jack Kirby would just draw something on the fly, and then Stan would take it and write in text, and when you break down those narratives, you can see some.
But I think
things why he structured the pages the way he did.
Yeah, but I think there were evolutions in the Marvel wave, lad, where it was
Yeah.
more of a full script, but it was never like not quite a full script. But Marvel demands a full script now. But my point is, even if
Mhm.
you give an artist a completely full script, there's still pieces of the story that they're going to be telling, even if it's just through background items that they're putting in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
And true
it's
color
things
as
like that.
well.
Yeah, people don't think about things like that. Like, oh, maybe it's as simple as a drink, just sitting.
It's a four-man project, Writer, artist, colorist, and letterer. Everybody puts something in it today. It wasn't the case, 20 years ago, but today everybody is equally. That's something that I try to tell to people. Everybody is equally important, even the letterer, even the colorist, even the artist, because we are all handling different scopes of the story and adaptation, and the amount of elements that everybody is putting in is much bigger now than it was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago.
Hey, real quick, Vlad. So that interview that just got booked that was supposed to be on the 10th and blah blah, and now it's on the 12th, right? You're co-hosting that.
Yep.
I'm gonna get you in trouble with him because you didn't say editor.
Oh no.
You said four. You said artist, writer, letterer, and colorer.
Yeah, editor is a manager, but we are the production team. That's why. Creative team is 4 people. Editor is the staff member. He is the supervisor. Yeah. He greenlights, he says, okay, this is, yeah. So, but we are the labor. We are the, in the trenches. We are like spitting dust and bones and sweating to put stuff in the page.
Even something as simple as, and I said simple, but it's not simple, like an angle, like a close-up or wide, and I'm speaking in film terms, but like
that's
the choice of perspective.
Yeah. But for example, how do you perceive things as a writer and editor, Jason? Because you're both of that, and a teacher, so like a multi-class.
So you mean, how do I kind of look at things differently?
When you're writing, when you're editing, when you're teaching, you're accessing different parts of yourself, I would say, and rules and everything. Like, how do you feel when you're switching?
Writing, I think, is like opening the vein. It's like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to try this, and I love the creative aspect of that. And then there's a little more like putting the rails on when I'm teaching, or putting the rails on when I'm editing, because both of those to me are more like, those are more helpful, they're more supportive roles, and I'm trying to help. In the case of like editing, I'm trying to use skills as a writer, but I'm doing it in a way to help that person achieve what they want to in the chapter, or whatever it happens to be. In the case of a classroom, I'm still authoring. I've got the 3-piece structure. We have a beginning, middle, and end of class, but there are 25 other voices that get to be part of that I can sort of invite and move along and almost manage in a way to get where we're going in that day's story, if that makes sense. So there's a story element to all of it.
So I gotta know, what's the best question or point? It can be either a question or a point that a student has ever made to you. Like, is there either a question or a point that like a student made and you were like, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, reading something, and especially something, The Hunger Games was a favorite of mine when I taught middle school. When I have a student that's like, hey, that's kind of like this other thing, or they point out something about a character where I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. There are a couple of times that happened with that book in particular, and there are still moments where a student will like go for something and I'm like, wow, they connected that, and I had never thought about it in that way. Tomorrow my students are going to create a playlist. We've read a couple of American literature pieces, and they're going to create some like a playlist of songs that match up. And activities like that always surprise me because I'm like, I didn't think about that connection in the lyrics of that song connecting to The Great Gatsby or whatever it happens to be. They have the option of doing a rap battle as well, like a slam poetry thing, if they don't want to do the playlist. So
That's cool.
yeah, and like projects like that, I've had students do multimodal mapping of like Middle Earth and parody songs of The Hobbit, like, and those are things that I couldn't script if I wanted to. I couldn't walk up to a kid and be like, "Hey, you like music? Can you do a parody song of this book we just read?" Like that's the student initiative and the student bringing their part of the talent and gifting to the story too. And what a fun thing! Like, how do you even grade that? It's like that's
All I know
1,000
is, where were
points.
you as a teacher when I was in high? Well, I mean, I guess you were in high school now that I think about it. So never mind that question.
Probably.
It answered itself, man. You were 2 grades above me. Yeah. So what?
Working my way through the system.
Don't remember any teachers anywhere near anywhere cool as what you just said. As far as in that regard, when I was in high school, it might just be that
They
it was a
also
different
have
age,
to put
too.
up with me though, so that's the.
Yeah. I grew up in Eastern Europe. That sums it up.
And that makes me curious that we ain't getting into a school system talk, but let's actually kind of get into a school system talk, man. Do you think it would benefit schools in general if they just edged a little bit more and are like, hey, let's use comics?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that well, part of that is like being willing to read things. I think that people kind of stick to the same curriculum because people don't read as widely as they should. And I think that that's going to be something that builds care, that's going to be something that builds consideration. And it goes back to your first question about our comics literature. If I have this very narrow myopic view of what counts, then I'm always going to be very limited in what I'm allowing to count at the same time. So there's only so much I can even envision when I'm working with people, when I'm working with students, when I'm telling a story. But if you get out there and experience some different media and try some different things out and start to appreciate what comics can do and other forms of storytelling, I think it makes you a better, more creative human.
Oh, definitely.
Imagine a school system where we became better, more creative people.
I think there were studies that prove that we as humans learn better with images than with words on occasion. So
yeah.
Comics definitely go in that direction.
I just need to find the universe that you're referring to so I can move me and my family to it, Jason. All right, like the one where, like, the school teaches you to be creative and nice and not. And all right, I'm digressing. Can I say, Jason? Oh my gosh, we have recently changed the questionnaire quite a bit, man. I highly recommend you all go over to the Patreon and subscribe. Like, they're getting twisted and a little bit funnier, and like I'm throwing some screwy questions. Vlad, I'm throwing some really, really screwy questions out there.
I saw.
Well, no, you saw that one, dude. I don't think you've seen the one where it's like, what was it? I had my boy help me make up a couple questions, and they are priceless, right? I think there might have been one on that one. I'll have to look through it all, man. I don't know. We do it a lot over here, right? But as far as like the first question, I feel like I need to take it off, man, because you won with the answer of tank. Like, yeah, that's the during the zombie apocalypse. Yeah, yeah, a tank. A tank.
Yeah. Plus you get to say tanks. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's the resting place. You get to be in the tank. You're protected, and I mean you can plan it out so you get around. You get your fuel. You get your materials, your weapons, all the things. So tanks. I thought about that. Also the question about the spiders. I won't spoil what it was. But that became a bonus question for my students to respond to today at the start of class. So I took it and
you took a question off the questionnaire and gave it to your class?
I totally did. Yes, I did.
Totally cool with that. That is so funny to me. I will send you the other 2 questionnaires if you want to pick through them to throw something as well.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, some of the questions are repetitive. And then there's these other ones that it's like, dude, who, what? Yeah, man, I got a 5-year-old. We did something really funny. I thought it was funny, you know?
I love it. Yeah.
I mean, we can do it. Zombie apocalypse one, that wasn't. No, if I hope he didn't come up with that at 5, man. I'd be a little worried, Jason. I mean, my boy loves stories and creative, right? So, with that, what point do you think it becomes pertinent? Because I know it's always important to introduce stories to kids and get them into storytelling.
hmm
At what age as a teacher? And do you have kids?
I don't. I don't have
Oh,
kids other than the ones I borrow from other parents for the school system.
if you wouldn't have ended that, that would have been a really, really terrible statement. If you wouldn't have like had those last 6 words, that's all I'm
Right.
saying.
Those prepositional phrases make a difference. Yeah.
I'm really glad you had that, man. I'm really glad that that sentence continued.
It
Um,
could have taken a dark turn. Yes.
look, man, I ain't trying to spell rapper without the letter P, okay? Um,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, Diddy, right? Yeah. So, but at what point do you think it's pertinent for a child's development for them to really, really start pushing stories into it? Like, at what age do you think it's like if you don't do it now, like if you
Yeah.
don't pick this moment, you're causing something that they will have a backlash in their life with later.
To be honest, I mean, I work more with adolescents. I work with older kids, but I have lots of friends that are like the early childhood people. They're all into like the K2s and the whatnot, which I've kind of had my mind turned to because I used to be like, oh, they don't read. What are they doing? Like before they get to the printed page. I think stories are early. I credit my parents for reading to me before I had the ability to really pick up the book and do much with it. Like I remember hearing fairy tales, and my mom will still tell the story of how like I would pick up on details and be like, "No, no, you left part out. Go back." Um, so early. I think we're built for that. I think we're built for stories. We're built for language. I believe it is at 6 months of age that our brains really like formalize our language of origin, which is why as you get older, it's harder to learn a new language. When you're a kid, it's like you're just inputting everything. When you're little, the brain is very pliable. But I think this is part of why we have cultural stories because these are messages we pass down. These are our ethics. They're our teachings, our principles, our laws, and we're telling them to kids so that they can get the ideas that we're after, challenge the ideas that we're after, which they will inevitably do. It's called teenage years, and start to build an understanding of like structure, beginning, middle, end. This works, this doesn't. That's not right. This is right. This should have been done this way. So I would say early. I mean, before you can even navigate a story yourself, read to your children. Read to somebody else's children, but only with their permission, with the parents' permission.
I'm gonna take this
Read.
episode and I'm gonna cut out clips and you're gonna look terrible, right? Because I'm just gonna like cut off
You're gonna sound bite me.
just the
Yeah,
last 4 words of everything, and
that's
then
right.
suddenly the FBI is gonna be at your door, Jason. And I'm gonna be like, my bad. It was really funny though. I got a lot of views.
One of those political smash cuts, absolutely.
Hey, but imagine if I did that, right?
I know.
And it,
Yeah.
and look, and it causes this whole thing. The FBI shows up at your house, blah blah. There's this huge outrage. I'll show
Mhm.
up. I'll be like, I was screwing around. Are y'all dense? You know, there's a full episode you guys could have went and watched and heard this all in full context. You know what this proves? The man is right. Everyone needs to read more. You want me to
That's right.
recommend a comic book? Right? And it could technically,
Mhm.
in the wrong run, just make it to where, comic books become accepted. So, yeah, man, this is my long running scheme. I'm sorry that you have to deal with the FBI for it to work.
I wasn't expecting that, but the subtitle is "Falling on the Sword," or maybe it's "The Sword of Damocles" or
No, no,
something.
no, no, no. You're not falling on the sword, man. It's just, look, it's just, you're just getting poked a little. All right.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
All right.
Because I'm
Yeah.
going to show up and be like, hey, hey.
You're gonna bail me out.
So, well, because I'm going to point them to the YouTube, Spotify, wherever they want to go stream it, I'll shove the actual edited file in their face if I need to, and be like, "Look,
Context matters, people." And I'll be going
uh,
like, "It was only a flesh wound." Yeah.
yeah, see, and then we can make it to where people read more comics. Come on, Jason, is it not worth it?
You have me tempted. You have me very tempted.
I
In the interest of the mission.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll do more than a day or two in jail.
Wait, what was that I signed to get on this? What should I have read that?
The small letters.
That's right. At the very bottom of your questionnaire, it's like size 2, and I'm like, oh, that says 5. That's fine.
It's perfectly fine. Everything's perfectly fine. You're safe. It's a safe.
Stop.
This is a safe place.
Yeah, you don't let nobody know what my real mission is here, man. Just look at the pretty art, okay?
Yeah.
That's right. This has been the Kafka podcast, everybody.
This
was safe as a postcard.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's not, right? I mean, but anything really, anything you put on the internet to a certain degree isn't, because, like I said, you could very easily take things out of context. I think that's the great thing about what you're doing, man, is you're helping people really see comics in the context that they've been written by the creators, because I think that's something that's glossed over by so many people. Have there been any comics that you've read that you think take it too far for a comic?
Oh, too far. It's a whole perspective thing, right? Like, it's easy to point to some of the stuff, like you could say Milo Manera. Is that necessary? But then it's like, but when you're talking about sexuality, there is a visual nature to it. There's an aesthetic to it. So from like a certain perspective of Protestant informed culture, I'm like, oh, should these people have clothes on? But then it's like, maybe I'm just looking at it through my lens and through my kind of vision that's been bounded by the things that have happened to me and the things that I've been taught. So I think that, oh my goodness, like, there are those moments in a comic that I kind of go, was that necessary? But it's definitely memorable. It accomplishes something horrific if it's a horror story, or social if it's like after some form of social commentary. So I'm gonna say the story serves its own purpose. I'm not gonna censor in that way.
And I fully agree, but
would I take it to my classroom? Now that's the
yeah. I mean,
the
yeah. There's certainly things. In that context, there are things that should be kept for adults because it's adult material, and that's just the way things are. But you answered that question, at least in part, in a way I expected you to.
Oh, good. Did I take a multiversal twist?
No, you made it to where I can do what I'm gonna do next, which is another point I wanted to get to. And like I said, it doesn't surprise me, but it is a cultural thing, as you say, because you instantly went to sexuality and nudity. All right. Which I love. I got you here for this, Vlad. Yeah, smirk away, bro. You know what's coming, right? You know what's coming. Because, like I said, it's cultural.
Not safe for work.
I'm not gonna take my shirt off if that's what you're asking.
Look, I already had Epic Voice Guy trying to strip on me. All right, so John was already trying to strip in his booth. I don't need none of y'all trying to strip. All right,
wait till you get to read the European comics.
Well, maybe if we get look, I ain't getting into all that, man. Whatever. There's too much coming up, and I'm not saying anything. We got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm not saying you got to see anybody stripped over here at the questionnaire. Let me be real clear with the way that I said that. But back to what I was saying, as far as you went straight to nudity and sexuality. Now, I think because of culturally where you are, like aliens, chest burster, popping out the chest. All right, right? That's shocking, but it's not shocking because it's violent. It's shocking because, oh my, what happened, right? But that's culture.
It was a new thing.
So yeah, it was like, that was crazy because the creature just burst out of this person's chest. But it wasn't the fact of the chest wound; it was the creature. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like a chest wound isn't a big thing. Like, think about it. If you would give your kids in that class a comic where somebody gets a hole straight through them, right?
Yeah.
But if they take their top off, that becomes more
Yeah.
questionable.
Isn't that strange? So strange.
I want to know your opinion of why you think that is in this area.
Absolutely. Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Did you just get a Are you going to go to Harry Anslinger next?
I think there's like this tradition of, things have to be buttoned up in a certain way. I think that there are the things that are kept from us in society, the things that are elusive, and a lot of what my upbringing has been. It was cool for me to watch RoboCop as a kid, but if there was like some form of nudity, uh, that was like, oh, it's the things that we choose to keep away that become this like moment of ingrained. Oh, we can't go there. It's taboo. Yeah. So very, very like the presentation of the body versus the destruction of the body. You're absolutely right. The mind should first go to the destruction of the body. Like it's not cool to kill people. It's not cool to harm people. It's not cool if you're an alien. I'm just going to say this to any aliens out there if you're listening. If you are thinking about going inside of someone's chest and bursting out, that is not a vibe. That is not a cool move. You should question your life decisions. I'm just going to say there's a Sunday school for you. There's a 5-step program if you're an alien that's considering that. Okay. But if you are a reasonably attractive person and you're thinking about taking your shirt off, more power to you.
No, that's if they're in America, that's an indecent exposure charge. Or well, at least if they're female. I guess if you're male, it doesn't count.
Yeah, that's a whole other sexism, double standards.
Yeah, you're going to jail.
Hester Prynne.
So you want to talk about Harry Anslinger? You apparently, I feel like based on your laugh, you know exactly who that is and what he did too.
I
actually don't.
You know who that is, Vlad?
Nope.
Oh.
Let me go Google that real quick.
The prohibition of a certain leafy substance.
Oh yeah, man. I teach 1920s, 1930s literature. Oh yeah, absolutely. You know the thing about alcohol, though? You want to know what really bothers me about alcohol?
Oh, no,
I'm
no,
glad
no,
you asked.
no. This prohibition.
It's the depression after. It's the. No, anyway, yeah, sorry.
But no. Harry Anslinger. Oh, I wasn't talking about alcohol.
Oh, let me Google that again.
Yeah, Harry Anslinger. I said a leafy substance, man.
Oh, gotcha.
What kind of substance?
Oh, narcotics. Oh, okay.
Oh, spirits.
Oh, okay.
Like
the bad juju spirits.
Why is it gotta be bad juju, Vlad? What? Like why? Like Benjamin Franklin smoked 4 foot of hemp or 4 foot of rope a day, and that's all I'll say. Or at least that's how I said.
Yeah, got you. Okay, I'm sorry. I was not that aware, but now I am.
Okay, well, because I only wondered because I mean, you at every point that I brought up, you brought up somebody that went politically to go against it, and I think that's interesting to realize politically how much our media has been controlled, and I wonder how much people think about that,
and the effects of it.
Hmm.
And the effects of it, like what that does to you, and what you think about as far as what becomes controversial and what's not.
The media control in America is really, really high. I mean, it's high everywhere, but in
not
US,
if you're Harry Anslinger. If
Yeah.
you're Harry Anslinger, you're not getting high on anything.
Yeah. But in US, it's sold as democracy, but it's highly controllable. That's the difference.
It's an odd way that they do it. I don't know. It's very
But form of control needs to be and to exist. when you have like a 330 million people nation worldwide of like multicultural environment, like the biggest multicultural environment in the world, like nation of all nations, actually.
It's also interesting to negotiate that question with parents. And I'll tell you, it's amazing how people get upset if parents don't want their kids to read something, and there's like this defense, like this teacher's going to get mad at me if
Hey,
I don't
Paul.
want my child to. It's like,
Hey,
actually, we
gentlemen.
could just talk about it.
Hey, sorry. Pause real quick.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
All right. I'm a dumbass. All right. Oh. All right. Can you start again as far as the parents, like right where you said that, man, and I'll cut it real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So that's also an interesting question to take up with parents and families, because it's like the question of, to what degree does someone have that agency in their kid's life? And people get really upset. It's like a defensive thing of, I'm going to go and talk to this teacher and say, does my kid have to read this? Like, we could have a conversation. But again, that goes back to my thing of being like a kind person and creative and thoughtful, but not everybody goes there first necessarily.
I mean, I think that's such an odd point, though, Jason. Like,
Yeah.
Because here's my whole point. Like, if you take any person, and you're able to get them to read the span of human history, which, firstly, ain't nobody got time for that, to read, like, all of that.
It's
like,
not that long, like nine books or something.
It's just, like I said, but I mean, like, if you could get the human history for, like, everything that's happened, just, and everyone, and somebody could read that, like, and you picked any random person to go read that, dude, they're going to be offended by things, right?
Of course.
Like things that were
It
done by
depends.
other humans, and every person you pick is going to be potentially offended by something that the other person wasn't, and this is going to differ. So I don't understand why people don't grasp the idea of having knowledge and reading things that offend you is good for you, because then you realize and you see those things out and about and you go, that ain't right, as opposed to where if you're never exposed to them and there's just something that's, you're kept shielded from, you see it in real life. Well, what do you think? You've never seen it before, so you don't know.
As they say, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. So I don't get the idea and the concept of parents specifically, like, they don't want their kids offended or exposed to things, because the younger, concepts should be introduced.
Who knows where that comes from? That's also a cultural thing for them. Maybe that was something that caused some trauma in their childhood. Maybe their grandparents, bullied them into reading or something like that they didn't like, so they're like subconsciously projecting. So there's like a lot of things why things can go either way.
There's a definite psychology to it all, and it's like, first of all, let's talk it through and talk about what it is about this book you don't like. Have you read the book? That's a question, because you should probably read it and be familiar. Have you talked to your child about this book? Have you talked to your child about this issue? How has this issue showed up in life in other ways? Those are all like places that I would want to go before someone just shows up and they're upset and they're like, I don't want my kid reading this book. Because there's a lot there they're not processing.
What's a couple books you've had that happen with? Because clearly,
yeah, of course. Well, not any book that you would expect, most likely. The Hunger Games, I had parents concerned about because of the level of violence. Yeah. This one will get you. The Crucible. Remember we were talking about Red Scare a little while ago? Yeah. The idea that the Crucible is about witchcraft offended a particular parent. And so it's like, do you know what the story is? Do you know the story of the Crucible and how it's an allegory and how it's not actually this thing? So, I mean, you got to be informed.
Can you do
if you're
me a
going to
favor?
oppose something, you should be informed.
So here's a question.
Do me a favor, Jason. Right?
For Jason.
For for your next, I'd say this probably at least needs to be a junior class. I want you to go over Adjustment Day with them.
Yes. The
You know
Chuck
the book
Palahniuk?
Adjustment Day?
Yeah, Chuck Palahniuk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I bet none of those parents have any idea what that book's about. And I bet a lot of those parents, if they knew that book, would go, my kid ain't reading that. But you should just put it in the criteria because they won't catch it.
There you go.
That reminds me like something else that people didn't catch from the Fight Club movie. the secret frame at the end of the movie.
Well, okay. That's that.
Now my question for Jason is based on this particular segment that we were talking about. Did you had any parent that came back to you saying, hey, that book was actually good, I read it as well?
I've never had that particular spin on the story. I had a parent who contacted me. This has happened very few times in my career too. Let me say that. It's not like something that happens every week. Like every week I'm like, what? You don't want your what? I had a parent that came and said, my child is having nightmares because they're reading The Hunger Games. And I was like, we can find something else if it's upsetting to them. They were like, no. They'd like to finish it. I just wanted you to know. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I mean, I've had nightmares about a lot of things. So that's fair.
But I know.
But just to reiterate real quick, a parent came in, told you that their kid was having nightmares from reading The Hunger Games. You were like, well, they don't have to reread it. And the parent said, no, they want to. Did you ever find out what induced these nightmares from that book?
No, I didn't. I can imagine based on the section that the Tracker Jackers, that scene in the book where they sting the child and the child swells up. Has anybody checked that out? Probably that scene.
I have not read
was
that
very
book.
Recent.
I don't read a.
Who knows what the kid read aside, or it could be a video game. I mean, like,
true,
maybe they were gaming
something they ate.
Yeah, so it could be a lot of things.
I just wouldn't expect the Hunger Games to incite a nightmare.
Yeah,
like there's like I would expect Adjustment Day to incite more of a nightmare in a child's head than the Hunger Games would, mainly because I think there's more of a sense of that could become a quick reality than the Hunger Games, where I don't think any living generation would see it.
Yes, hopefully not. Hopefully.
Maybe something else. I mean, like, most of the times when you have nightmares, it's because you had a visual imagery in front of you, a scary moment from the movie or something from the news, or video game. Like, video games can be quite violent. We all seen that. So
Predator. I had nightmares about Predator. I still watched it and still really enjoyed it, but I had nightmares about it.
I had from Alien,
I mean,
second
those
part
are
when I was a kid.
Yeah, those ones, like, those are if you watch them as a kid, I think they're made of nightmares. You know what I mean?
And again, key point: we all watched it. We didn't read it.
That's
true. Maybe the mother connected the nightmare to the book because that's what she saw the kid was doing, but the nightmare came from something else that the mother or the parents haven't seen the kid was doing, video game or something on the phone, or who knows.
Yeah,
maybe saw some reel on Instagram. There's some,
Oh God.
Yeah, well, we all know that algorithms do have the tendency to make darker content on purpose for people, especially when they're testing stuff and.
Well, thank you, Vlad, very much for the segue.
You're welcome.
With that in mind, I'm curious to see the effect that you think, Jason, that TikTok and Reels and things like that have had to the attention spans of the younger generation reading. Because clearly, reading will give you a dopamine kick, but it's when, like, you get to that point in the book. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not dopamine kick. dopamine kick, dopamine kick, which is what Reels and TikTok and all that's what they're made to do. Just give your brain constant little doses of dopamine. In my opinion, you can get a bigger, more satisfying one from doing something like reading the entirety of the book, getting invested in it, and then getting to that moment that causes.
Yeah, but you don't have the focus
Well,
for it
I
because of
agree. I
the
agree. So,
social media.
what do you think as far as the effect that's had on the younger generation, coming up with all of this? You know what I mean? They're coming up with the phones in their hands, the devices in their hands, Reels, everybody trying to get your attention as much as possible. Follow us on TikTok. I don't post much, but there's stuff over there from the questionnaire. I recommend
There you go.
I recommend checking out the entirety of the conversations, though. We get kind of wacky over here. But yeah, just your opinion on the effects.
Well, first of all, I'll say if they're watching your TikTok, most likely it's a positive effect. But I will start with the positive. Like, we live in this digital age. We live in a time when there's mass amounts of information out there, and navigating that information is a lot to process. It's a lot for people to handle. So if you're kind of ingraining yourself in the system of swipe, nope, yep, nope, that's kind of building a literacy for how to navigate a world like that. So that is good. That's a strength. However, on top of that, I do think you need like that critical awareness to go, I should see more of this. Like, if you soundbited me, if I was a 2 second thing on TikTok, there's more to the story. And I think that's part of, maybe in addition to creativity, something that an education system could do. Not that I'm running for anything or anything like that, but a really high quality education, conversation with your family, whatever it happens to be, would say, let's take in the larger view. Even if it's oh, you didn't like that. Why? And then continuing that why to get the fuller story and the fuller picture. So I do think that there has to be kind of a bounce back to that. Without the like critical reasoning, without digging into the bigger picture of what a story, what a media has to offer, or a medium, then I think you're limiting yourself. But I could say the same thing about music videos. If you go back and look at like the frame of a music video and the way that it's like image, 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 it's not an entirely the past 5 to 10 years sort of thing. But in addition to growing up with music videos, I also watched the Thriller music video, which is a long form story. I also took in a lot of film, a lot of television. I read books connected to film and television. I read comics connected to those books. So, it wasn't just like this one thread of media. It's like more of a cat's cradle, to throw in a Vonnegut thing, of like all of this stuff is connected. So if you're gonna be thoughtful, yeah, I think that just looking at one form of media and swiping through it is going to be very limiting. Same with algorithms, like you were talking about.
Don't get me started with algorithms. All right, Jason, I hate algorithms. Because look, I'm like, I don't look, because to do promo on any of these social networks, you got to figure out the algorithm.
But they like
right?
you.
I mean, I don't look, man. Vlad, go write me an AI program to promo the questionnaire. That's what I want you to do now with that statement you just made. Just go write an AI program to do it, and it'll work for all of us. And I ain't got time for this freaking algorithm crap, man. So I think it's odd because, like I said, you do have that on social media as well. Like, the more you are on social media, the more it will give you an echo chamber.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is terrifying. Do you see a reflection of that within the students that you deal with, as far as when you're trying to introduce a subject to them from a book or whatever it may be, where they've been in an echo chamber so much that they are stuck in that echo chamber and won't hear thoughts from other places?
What the trend that I've seen more, and it's kind of interesting, I know grown people that are more that way than kids, interestingly enough. A lot of the kids that I've worked with, that I've talked with, have a little bit more of that flexibility, which is interesting to me. And it gives me hope in a way. Whereas a lot of like people in my family that, cousins I forgot that I had, that come across a challenging idea, it's like, oh, I don't know about that. What about this? And it's like, well, that's not actually related to what we were talking about. That's a total separate space that you just went to based on whatever I guess you've been honed to respond to with whatever media you're consuming. But kids, I think there was a time that I saw a little bit more of like that generation passing down, but there's a really nice kind of questioning sensibility that I see in young people right now. And again, this is the people that I work with. These are the conversations that I'm exposed to and that I hear or overhear. And so, I mean, we're in a political season right now. We're a week, as we're recording this, we're a week away from election season, and I've really not had the sort of polarized outburst among young people that adults on my Facebook thread seem to be having. So there's hope, I think. I hope there's hope.
I mean,
they still haven't been captured and converted.
Yeah, it just kind of hurts my head. And I know, Vlad, you're not. I mean, I know you see the chicanery going over here in the election, but you don't have to experience it firsthand. Congratulations, Vlad. It's one plus in not living in the U.S. right now and living in Serbia instead.
No, man. The whole world experiences American elections.
Well, and that's another crazy thing. I don't even want to start to get into, but I mean,
there's no escape from that matrix.
And I really think like this one in particular has been more of a.
Yeah, it's more dramatic than the last one.
Look, man, it looks more like pro wrestling than it ever has, and that's what I'll say about it.
Well, the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
New season.
Oh, so it's WrestleMania. I got you.
That's why they don't let the 4-year-olds grill. The stakes are too high.
Yeah. For this season of elections, the villains are domestic.
Aye. Oh, great. So
there's no outside force where the narrative is going to go. Right now, narrative is going.
It is nice to hear from you, though, Jason, that you see these kids questioning, because I think that's one of the most important things is for the kids coming up right now is they need to question and they need to read.
So.
And any way that you can get a kid to read, I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me, Jason. Like if you can get a kid to pick up something to read it. I don't know that it should concern you that much as to what it is, as long as they're reading. I mean, there's a couple things that should concern you. You know what I mean? Like, if he picks up the Anarchist Cookbook and that's the only book he's reading, okay. Right. You may need to have a conversation with the kid. All right. Like if that's his only book and he's reading it a lot.
But
there is a positive
effect. If it's Chuck Palahniuk, we're safe. If it's Chuck Palahniuk, we're good.
Yeah, I mean,
there is a positive effect of social media in US specifically, especially TikTok, for example. Because on TikTok, you have to have subtitles. So therefore, whether you like it or not, you're reading by default, which is a great thing because do you have subtitles when you go to, cinema, to theater, or to watch Netflix, or, you don't. So media separated reading from watching, which are two different habits. But now on TikTok, on social media, you're combining that. So basically, kids are reading without being aware that they're reading. So in a way, everybody's reading.
I turn the subtitles on when we're watching TV on, like, if we're watching SpongeBob or whatever.
Some people don't do that.
So I do that, right? Secondly, are you telling me that there's subtitles on the TikToks that I post?
Yep. No, maybe not on yours, but like majority of TikToks do have, because this is like the US statistics. 170 million people are having active TikTok accounts, which means that's more half a country. So at least that influenced the level of literacy in the States a little bit higher, because everybody, you know, when you're working, you silent it down. You don't know what's happening in the video if you don't read. So, you know,
And you're reading quickly,
yeah.
which in the reading profession we call automaticity. It's
So if,
more automatic.
in a way, people are trained to read now, how to convert that into reading the other media, for example, comics or novels or something else. That's the, you know, how to pull them out.
And that's it. Like, literally, sometimes I'll say to students, step back from this page. You've been looking at the image, you're looking at the words, but let's step back and look at the overall design. Like, let's look closely, but let's also take in the full view.
Yeah. Reflection, analysis. Yeah, that's a. So.
I've also had students ask me to put captions on videos more this year than I ever have. And I wonder now if that's because they're becoming a little more attuned to, oh, I can also read this as I'm going through.
Yeah, well, that's just my observation from, you know, data online that I gather, but it's definitely worthwhile checking, you know, and doing some studies, because it's a thing. It's more like a cultural thing. I mean, we hear, you know, in this part of Europe, we grew up with subtitles because, you know, we were having multinational movies, films from all over the world. So when you don't know language, you get subtitles, because sometimes synchronization of the voices is not that good, and, you know, people want to hear the original. So, you know, cultural thing, our direction. So we had that by default. But many countries in Europe, Germany, for example, France or Italy and others, they had synchronization. So, and in the States, English is the default language, so you don't need a title. Yeah. But now with the technology and everything, it's paired with TikTok the most, because in Twitter it's just text, Instagram is just imagery, Facebook is a combination, but TikTok took it by default, like they installed that. So basically you don't have a choice. So in a way, that's an interesting thing.
I wonder, Jason, what do you think? Let's say, because I know they keep saying that they're going to ban TikTok in the U.S. I don't know how many times I've heard that. As far as they're trying to do it, blah blah blah. They're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. All right, whatever. I don't care. Let's say they did it, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say it's accomplished that just no more TikTok, right? What effect reading wise do you think that would have on the generation?
Book talk.
Yeah, true. That book talk is a thing. I think that it would probably, when you say to a kid, you can't read this, you can't have this. Oh, you don't want to read that book. It's not for you. I think that there would be a very quick move to find a back way into TikTok. And I think there would be slang for it, and kids would be like, hey, did you da-da-da, whatever the slang happens to be. I think that the literacy is at that point of kids with technology that they'll subvert. I think that it might be a little more limited. You might not have it as much. And certainly some tech company would go and be like, oh, you don't have TikTok. Guess what? We got this, kids. So they're going to go to that thing. But the kids that want the OG experience are going to figure out their backdoor channel into it, because that's what kids do. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, and then we'll have, like, in education, we'll be like, now, you know, you have to watch out. Listen for this. Report this. Like, okay.
Oh, do you get a lot of that with the new lingo over there, Jason, where it's like this word is actually this now. So when a kid says this, you got to blah 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 blah. I mean, look, when we were kids, we came up with all kinds of crap, so you get away with crap, right? And I mean, why would every generation do that? Do you get regular updates?
To some degree, but I actually educate myself a lot because I like to appear young and hip, which is neither one is working. So when I overhear something,
but you're cool.
We try, you know, we're cool beans, which is no longer in use. When I hear something, I'll pull it in, and then I will intentionally misuse it to be like, "Ha, see," and then the kids get tired of hearing it. So it's part of the fun that I have with them, though, and that's a literacy too. Of like, you're creating your own language, which I can't be part of because I'm in my 40s. But guess what? Now I'm going to hear it. You said Riz, I'm going to say Rizzo. You say gas, I'm going to be like, it's so gassy in here, guys. Like, I'm going to take everything that represents that part of culture and have as much fun with it as I possibly can. And that's kind of like, that's the subtext of satire to the class, but we're also having fun together and we're talking about how it all works.
Here we go. Teaching God mode level.
We try. We try to keep it anything but Skibbity Ohio. We try.
What's the thing that you've used as a teaching instrument? Book, movie, comic, whatever. That someone would hear and go, that worked?
That's a really good question. Memes are kind of fun. Memes with vocabulary, you would be surprised how quickly, you might not be surprised, but I was really surprised how quickly students connected like vocab to memes. It's like this great way to reinforce. I started with comics, not reading them as much as creating them, and it became this great way to review like anything and everything literary. Like to create a comic with kids and have them actually go through some of the process. There's so much involved with it. You're basically, in education, we have all of these standards. There's something like 80 that I have to teach or something like that. And in building a text like that, you're basically hitting on all of them, depending on the kind of story you're telling. True story.
I think a meme. I wouldn't have ever imagined learning by memes, but when you said it, I mean, it makes sense. You know what I mean? So that is definitely one that it's like, really? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So what made
Train
you
your
decide
satire.
So what made you decide to write this book? Huh? Yeah?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, I always wanted to be a writer. It was a dream. And I applied to do like a presentation at a conference during the pandemic years, when the world had turned over, and it wound up happening online and being really expensive. So I wound up not doing that presentation. But I had an editor that reached out and was like, "Would you like to write a book about using comics in teaching?" And I was like, "Heck yes, absolutely." I'm swiping right on that. Absolutely. So this became kind of the project. I got to build, talk with colleagues, have the support of family, have the support of a partner that I was with at the time, and putting this together, and get to talk about comics that I love in a way that I love. So it was triple win.
Nice.
My dog's got a bone. She thinks the cat's gonna take it. The cat doesn't care
Is that a
about your
metaphor?
bone. Dog, calm down. She's a freaking pig. Yeah, no,
that was off topic.
well, it's because it's the in the background. I just wanted to explain why it sounded like my dog was trying to kill somebody.
It's cool. It's fine.
It's just the cat because of the bone. You know what I mean? Dog wants the bone, you leave it alone. That's just the case, right? And I love that you were presented that bone, man. And I definitely would have jumped in it as well. I mean, you're getting a chance to take something you've loved and to research it like that and put it forth as literature, which man, it amazes me because there are so many people that we've brought on. I mean, whether it been Fabian Niciasa, whether it be Alex, not Alex Segura. I mean, we just had Robert. I'm not gonna pronounce his. I'm not gonna butcher his last name, so I'm gonna pronounce it. Who put out Legends of Indie Comics? Everyone that and the Legends of Indie Comics is a prose novel. It's a bunch of short stories of indie comic book characters that have been buried for a while. And then, like I said, Fabian and Alex are both also writing prose novels, but they're both actively doing comics. I mean, Fabian, has a sordid history that Fabian's done a lot. So is Alex, for that matter. So I think it's interesting to see these writers doing both. I wonder, do you think people think about that and the fact that thinking about comic book writers as writers, not comic book writers.
Yeah, I mean, I totally embrace that idea of like you're telling the story. Now the page might look somewhat different, and you do have the combination of the artist, which adds like this brand new baby creation of like artist author. We mingled it together. There's some new DNA, lots of things to talk about there, but you know, it also creates an interesting point because people assume that with prose, well, obviously I'm learning more because there are more words. But when you compare out, I mean, depending on the comic, it's going to depend, of course. But the words that you get in prose are there, very often repeated to describe what's in the image. Are you really getting that many more really valuable words when you're just writing it out versus getting the image and the word? Are you still getting valuable words? Is my question. Even if the words are distilled down to the dialogue,
Well,
right?
no,
Just
because
because I see more of something doesn't mean that it's necessarily better.
let me elaborate on your point. It's like, you see the word chair or the word couch or the word mountain or the word
Hmm.
tree and all these things again and again within prose or novels. And you're not going to really see that word repeated a lot within a comic book because the, there's picture there of the thing that I just mentioned. So
Hmm.
I mean, you are right in that as far as that, because I read something recently that, and I don't know how accurate it is, and I'd have to do research. So nobody quote me on anything about what I'm about to say, but I'm going to cut it
I'm
into a TikTok.
citing you
I,
right now.
I'm
I'm
just
so
going to cut it
excited.
into a TikTok where I'm edited out of context, because why not, right? But comics typically use more unique words than like a novel
Hmm.
or a prose novel, and it is based on exactly what you just said, because they do not have to describe the the scene. It's
Hmm.
entirely unnecessarily to say, oh, the chair was over there and the, wallet was over here, because the image is all there. They told they wrote it out. That's what's funny that I really think a lot of people don't think about is the writer did have to write this information out to give to the
Yes.
artist to put down on a page. So it's technically been written, but then made to look cooler and just easier to take in, like you would a story in real life, and all you have to do is read the words. And the words that we pass between one another, which is the greatest way we tell stories, are is where we're going to handle the most unique words. So that's just it's a very interesting fact that I don't think people think about whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me
And
dive
when you
into it.
combine that with the idea that there's so many Marvel and DC and other forms of, I mean, other publishers where how many comic book characters have some sort of scientific origin or historical setting, or there's something philosophic happening in the narrative that then becomes part of it. So you're getting like all of these really interesting words that go across different areas. So I might not have chair, but I might have something more about like the periodic table.
Well,
But
firstly,
that's
the thing.
because the comic books
Yeah,
are,
go ahead, bud.
in a way, a vocabulary as well.
Hmm.
It's a language. It's they have their own semiotics. They are a visual and combination multimodal language. So you have a combination of elements in the visuals, and you have a combination of elements in the textual. What also is interesting distinction is that you can name people who write comic books writers, but they can be everybody who writes is a writer, but not everyone is novelist, not everyone is academic research writer, scholar, not everybody's a movie film script writer. So you have like all these distinctions. Comic book writers are writers, same as novelists, but they may not be novelists because they may not know how to write a novel, because you have a bigger vocabulary, you have bigger canvas, you have more tools to work with, like more elements. What the artist is putting in a visual, you have to extract that in words. So it's a different skill. So
Hmm.
in those manners, technical things, when we're making distinctions, that's important one to make.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean that's imperative, man. It's
But you have to learn the language whatever you do. You have to learn it either by reading and digesting, or just making up your own, or the combination. Everybody, from what I saw, is doing a combination. Sometimes you invent the new sound for that panel in a comic book when somebody hits something.
I'm just gonna say real quick, how are you gonna drop out of school and then get a PhD, Jason? What the crap?
I'm just an ironic kind of guy like that. That also speaks to the fact that I don't like school as typically done. I like to try different things, and I don't share that story with students a lot because I don't want to be the person that they're like, "Hey, he did it," so like I'm gonna. But there is that story of what we assume in somebody and what we assume somebody's gonna do. It's not always the thing they do. It's not always the path they take, and we don't all take the same path.
You just make a break between levels of schooling.
That's right.
Technically.
Whoa, hey, no.
A summer break.
I'm clicking.
By the way, that book that you wrote on comics, was that before the PhD or the after PhD? And
so can I hold it up and be?
Yeah, you can.
This one,
That
Yeah.
one, yeah.
That was after PhD.
So
Yeah.
how did the PhD knowledge that you gathered, the technical skill of writing an academic book, all the research and methodology and everything, how did that influence you to write that book? Like, did it make it easier, or more creative, less creative, more structural? What was the path?
Yeah. So in one way, it made it easier. When you put letters after your name, when you get credentials, people assume certain things, and so it does open doors, which is nice. As far as thinking about like structure, there was that part of it with the writing, and honestly, it's also like I did this, I can do hard things kind of path. As far as writing for like people that actually want to read, that's where a PhD is kind of tricky, because you learn to write in this way that nobody wants to read. And so I've had to learn that balance. Like I do blog posts too and things like that, where okay, I'm writing for this journal, so I'm gonna put all of those terms in there, but now I want to write in a way that human beings want to consume. And ideally, when I'm writing for the journal, I also like to try to push that a little bit and pull in like language that people actually want to use as well. But there is kind of a like almost switching between those two worlds of, okay, now I'm writing because I know someone's going to ask about this methodology. Now I'm writing because somebody wants to know about the method and methodology briefly, but they're more interested in what I actually have to say about how to use this.
That's a very, very intriguing, man. I do like you said, you got critical literacy, and then you have empathy as the main two topics you covered in this. And I think learning empathy through comics, I think, is something that it's very easily done. If you read a number of comics, I think it's easy to become empathetic with different people in different situations because of the plethora of things that are introduced. I'm absolutely positive it's one of the things that made me empathetic. If it wasn't for certain comics I read, well, we'll just leave that as a what if. All right.
Right.
I like it being a what if, and the fact that it's a what if is good. And I'm sure there's some other universe out there I didn't read comics, and I don't want to meet that version of me.
Yeah.
I don't, but he's not probably
So
here.
I just want to.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go back quickly a little bit more to Jason on his journey on PhD.
Oh,
just to check with him, like, how was it for you? When did you decide to do? How long it was? Like, can you give us some, biographical moment of your journey on PhD? Because for the audience to hear about that.
Absolutely. So, as we kind of mentioned, school was not necessarily something that I connected with when I was going through school. And I came to a point in my life where I was like, maybe there is a part of my story that needs to be told. Maybe there's something that I can do as a teacher that would be positive in the world. And so I started this path. And when I started the path of teaching, I couldn't believe I was a teacher. I remember looking in the mirror and being like, "You're a teacher? What do you do? What?"
How
And
old were
so
you when you made the switch?
23, 24, somewhere in there. Yeah. I always wanted to be a writer, but teaching made me very nervous. So I had been teaching for about 8 years and had kept going back to school. I did a bachelor's degree, I did a master's degree, I got a specialist. And I was at this point where I had some mentors that were like, you should get the doctorate. You should check this out. And I was like, wouldn't that be funny? That was my first kind of thinking of like, I mean, that would be really cool to get to study in that way, but also just so ironic to have this path through education, this unexpected kind of turn, and get to see what this is like. And so I very skeptically applied to some places and connected with a person named Sturge Butzakis, who studies comics critically and has written about them. And Sturge became this person that I connected with, and that relationship, that friendship between like student and advisor was really there. And so I was interested in going through, finishing, seeing what was on the PhD side of things. And it took me, I went through in the like traditional time of about 4 years, but I also went full time. I taught courses at the University of Tennessee and a couple of other places, Lee University and some different places, and kind of went through that way. But it was a journey that I would say, if I'm being honest, it was very much like I would stop and question myself and go, now you're doing this for a purpose, right? I wanted it to always be purposeful, and I didn't want to just do it to do it. And at the same time, it was also very intimidating to go
Well, that
into.
was its purpose, yeah, to question the purpose.
Exactly, exactly. So it was only when I was really reflecting on my defense that I was like, this was, these people were building something into me here. And there was a big questioning of myself throughout the whole process of like, do I belong here? So am I really good enough to go through this process and defend this and do all of these things? Which again, I mean, you're talking to someone that didn't have a background in education. So to take this step was kind of walking out on a limb in some ways, but it was a good limb. It was a good metaphorical tree.
Sometimes you gotta walk out on that limb and really just hope it supports your weight. Because man, I want that fruit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
To that point,
exactly.
I'm curious with with empathy being one of the focuses on this book. Is
Mhm.
there are there? I want a two-part question. Is there a book that you would highlight comic book wise that you look at and go, this has a great amount of human empathy in it? And then another one you look at and go, I don't know what's wrong with the guy that wrote this, but
Yeah, yeah. So I'll start with the positive ones of, I mean, there's this great middle grades graphic novel comics world out there. So one of the books that I highlight is uh when stars are scattered. Sorry, when stars are scattered. Um and that book, like, there's this great story of immigration, and there's this great story of survival, and it's an autobiographical story. And so that's a beautiful book. But I would say, when you were talking about empathy a little while ago and how empathy was kind of something that you built, the first thing for some reason I thought about was Peter Parker. Like, you gotta be with that guy. He's been in school since the 1960s. Most of us went to high school for 4 years. Dude has been in high school for 4 decades. I mean, it's crazy. So he's had some empathy. Batman has a trauma and dresses in a rubber suit. We can all relate to that. Superman has this like travel to dimension, another world, and has to get used to this new place. Okay, but like, there's this human aspect
Yeah.
of all of these characters and stories.
All
Now,
right.
somebody that doesn't do it as
Green
well,
Lantern is just schizophrenic.
right?
About.
Yeah,
I mean,
space cops.
All right.
you
We have to
gotta
cut
put out
back to
some
your
delicious
Batman
videos,
answer.
images.
Yes,
We have to cut back to your Batman answer
that's
Oh,
the soundbite.
because
Bruce Wayne stuff.
I that was so perfect for a soundbite. I could take like I could take like 30 seconds worth of sound bites and just put them up, and I really think you might have the FBI showing up at your door at this point, Jason. Right? But to the point of Batman, I don't know. And I look at that character nowadays, and I haven't read Absolute Batman, but I heard it's phenomenal. But
Hmm.
and it's a very
It is
different
good.
story. Yeah, it's a very different story as far as there's not the rich family behind it. But I'm sorry, man. Look, if you've got that much money, look, I'm really sorry that happened. But you know what?
Yeah.
There are people that are poor that had that happen to them, and they didn't go around and start beating up other poor people. You rich piece of I mean, that's just flat out my point, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
When
there
it
are
comes to
definite problems with it.
yeah, when it comes to
Yeah.
Bruce
Well,
Wayne, I have no empathy. He is
that's
one
his
character.
therapy.
Yeah, no, dude, that guy,
He's handling Gotham as a Bruce Wayne, but he's handling himself as a Batman.
yeah, he needed to go handle his whole self in a psychiatrist's office,
Yeah,
and if he
well,
wanted
you
to
know,
fix his city, go do it with the amount of money he had and stop beating up the poor and causing more problems. That's just one for me, especially at that age. I look at and I'm like, dude, I have no sympathy. We have enough
Yeah.
a-holes like this in the real world that think they experience some trauma, and then they got $8 billion, a private jet, a private plane, and they like to go to Epstein's Island. And I have no sympathy. I have none. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because in the real world, if Bruce Wayne exists, he went to that island. I have no sympathy. You know? Like, I just
Bruce
don't, right? But then I
Bruce
look
Wayne
at
in the real world is like a 3-month story at best.
Bruce Wayne in the real world is a story that I don't need written out. I see enough of it in the real world. You know, I don't need that story unless it's a story of like him actually really being a good person and taking his money and doing the right thing for wherever he's at, and
that's kind of Lex Luthor.
that's a work of fiction.
That's yeah.
I know.
And he enlists these kids. He's like, "Hey, little boy, you want to help me fight crime?" That's a whole other thing.
Well, you know,
All right,
I know a guy who had a thought on that like 60 years ago or so. You know, it's called Frederick Wortham. You mentioned him
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. There's a
he
willing
wasn't.
suspension of disbelief that keeps going in the Batman
Yeah,
stories.
he wasn't.
I
He wasn't
agree.
a fan.
yeah. If it wasn't for Batman's bad guys, there, yeah. But let's flip to the other side of that
They're
question.
the different type of you know.
Yeah, let's flip to the other side of that question. Is
They're
there
for
a comic
Freud and Jung.
yeah, that you look at Jason and you go, man, something was wrong with that guy. This says this is just this is just raw.
Yeah. I mean, there's a Tom King story that I have a hard time connecting with. What's it called? Where the characters. It's also about trauma. Heroes in Crisis. Is that the one? Now, I'm not like a Tom King hater. I enjoy Tom King stuff. But that's one where I'm not going to be like, there was something wrong. I think it was probably more or less somebody trying to work within the constraints of what DC would allow them to do.
Miracle Man, maybe.
Miracle Man I like, but this one I think it's called Heroes in Crisis, and it's like there's a therapy robot, and there's just something about it that I don't connect to. Now, again, Tom King, I'm not like a Tom King hater, as I know some people are. I enjoy a lot of his stuff, but that one for some reason I just don't connect with, and I think just knowing the little bit about DC storytelling, I mean, there are things you can do, there are things you can't do. And sometimes you get to work on a character or story and you're like, I want to do this, but okay, well, we'll do this instead. So, playing with other people's toys when they won't let them all out of the box and let you have all the accessories has got to be cool at first, and then it's like
I've had
And then
many
you
discussions.
go on to do a create your own thing.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, I've had many discussions with creators that have worked for the big two, and in discussion of like, who was it recently that I don't know, like especially if you get on like an X-Men book or something like that, and it's like you're trying to pick the ones you want, and who do you have access to, who do you not, who can I play with, who can I pull this character who's real obscure just out, like am I? So it's very much a give and take when you're working on one of those big two, especially when you're working on one of the big team books. And like I said, you can check out the past quests. We've had creators on and had in-depth discussions about that. But I think it's funny because, like I said, we were talking about just teaching empathy in a book. And I think one that people would look at, and Kat's just like loving some attention, one that people would look at and think was very unempathetic, I think, is, have you heard of Crossed
Oh,
Cross, I think
by Garth
so.
Ennis?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I would think people would initially look at that story and think that it's
yeah. What the hell was wrong
very
with him, and what the hell is wrong with you to even mention it?
well,
That's a
because but if you
dual
look at it,
question.
it is very much an empathetic situation to make it to realize that if you had to deal with something like that and people just suddenly inverted and like we lost everything that made us human to deal with that as another human, oh my God, that's terrible. That's terrible. And there are people within our society that deal with people like this because there are people that don't register to normal human emotion and feelings and what we think is right and wrong, and it doesn't matter. So I do think in that book, well, you wouldn't think it knowing that book. See, this is why I brought it up, Vlad. Don't you know, dude? If I bring something up, there's a point, or I'm on a random ramble, right? This isn't a random ramble. There's a point. It shows the empathy of people that have been inflicted by that kind of people in our world. It can show the nature of that within that comic. But I think it's funny because I don't think people would ever see that from that comic because, yeah, it's pretty screwed up.
Yeah, well, and that cycles back to your question of like the censorship question, right? Like I think about the places the mind goes in that way, and I think about a Clive Barker, a Stephen King, some of the places, David Cronenberg, those kind of places that people go, and it's like, well, that's disturbing and it's dark. And Garth Ennis goes to dark places in his work, but is he exploring something? Is he exercising something? Because the flip side of that is, uh, I interviewed Gregory Wright, who worked with Clive Barker and adapted his comics and stuff, adapted his books to comics, and people are like, they're the nicest people, you know. They've gone to these places. So what's the process of like getting into those places and working through them in a healthy way versus not having the conversation or kind of suppressing things and being like, oh well, we're just going to take this pain and just let it be. I mean, I think that's part of empathy too, is like sometimes if you have something crappy that happens to you, I'm using the word crappy because I'm a teacher, insert your own word here, you might want to write about it, and it might not be something that you want to look at again, and it might not be something that somebody else wants to look at again. But like, dude, the story of the crow, it's a painful story, but it goes to a place and it processes something that people relate to in some way.
And you let it out yourself, so in a way, it's a kind of like a healing process for you as well.
Yeah.
And that way, you can become that nice person. Because maybe they're nice persons because they put all the horrorities in their work, so they took it out of themselves, and they can be the good guys.
Yeah, the art in a way acknowledges something. It validates something that I don't think science does. I don't think math does this, where like we have crappy things that happen or beautiful things that happen, and we represent it in some way. And you get to do what you want with it. You can go publish it. You can put it in a back room and never talk about it. You can kind of do the portrait of Dorian Gray and eventually become it. But like that's the thing. Art is a part of your experience,
And it's funny too.
good or bad.
This goes back to the first time we ever had Doug Wagner on the show, right? Or a plastic vinyl plush, as well as a number of other things, man. I recommend you check out his work. He's been on the Quest several times with his pan cons, and then a couple times on the show, coming on with Doug's Dabs, The first time I brought him on, I can't lie, he's got like my favorite introduction on the show because it ended with something, and then and I want to see where this guy gets therapy because if he's got a therapist that's helping him, I need one too, right? I'm looking for a good one. If Doug's got one that works, I know it's got to be up to par. It'll work for me. I've read this man's work. His response was, "I don't need a therapist. I write comic books." And Wagner's like, dude, he's such a nice guy. You know what I mean? But he writes things about plushies biting people's heads off and then eating them, and I mean stuff that's like, whoa. But there's also a great deal of depth within those as far as just being willing to accept somebody that's different. You didn't, so you paid the price for it, and that's the kind of thing that happens. So I think it's interesting in that, but like it's therapy through writing, and I don't know, man. There's so many things I don't think, and I wonder if it's just because we don't think critically enough as a species. I worry that the amount of information that we now have access to, because it's endless, makes it to where we're less likely to critically think.
Yeah, I worry about that too. I think it's an important pause point because you gotta question, you gotta ask, you gotta process. And I'll go back to what you were saying about therapy because I have been to therapy and processed experiences and processed family life and things I don't understand about myself. And ironically, I don't know if it's every model of therapist. I don't know if it always works this way, but a therapist will usually give you like homework. You go, you write something, you think about something, you do a gratitude journal. And my therapist knew that I liked comics. And so she started giving me like these short, draw this experience, draw the things that make you strong, draw the aspects of you that are like a superhero. So she started giving me like these multimodal little kind of things to go and think about and explore. And they were short little things. I'm not a talent in the world of art or anything like that, but it was a way of processing. And some of it I want to look at again, and some of it I don't.
Yeah, I do the same thing with journaling.
I probably should, but that's not it.
Well,
I draw with my 5-year-old, and then I'm like, and I ain't got time for nothing else because he's like, draw this Cybertruck perfect, and I'm like, Daddy's not an artist, buddy. He's like, well, draw it like you drew that, and I'm like, buddy, I can't draw like Mike. Well, why not? So then I have to go through explaining the fact that, Mike has spent decades to get to that level of craft. And he's like, well, Daddy, I just want you to be able to do it. But again, he's 5, so, it's trying to explain that hard concept to him to where it's not just instantaneous. And this is why I don't agree with TikTok and its constant dopamine feed. And I think people should try and get their dopamine in a pure way. Because I like it. I don't like it stomped on. I like it pure. Just made that look, see, dude, there are so many clips we can cut out of this, Jason. I think I could end your teaching career.
Man, who knew that fine print? That is a thing. Why wasn't I a critical reader?
I figured if anybody was going to catch the fine print on the questionnaire at this point, it'd have been the dude with a PhD.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. You got me.
I mean, they don't call me the unknown factor for nothing. You know what I mean, Jason? That's just a fact. But look, for all y'all out there, go out. Check out Jason, man. You can check out that book. There's a link in the description where you can go order it for yourself, right? Because comics are literature. Comics will teach empathy. Comics can teach you more than you would ever think. I promise you that. All right, especially if you're really, really just willing to like go around a comic book store and just look around. You're gonna find books from every co-host except Dave, but Dave can point you to some great ones that will be things that you would not expect in a comic book. I know that. Right?
True enough.
And like I said, you can go to the link in the description and you can get Jason's book, man. And Jason, it has been a pleasure. Now, for everyone out there, right? If you've enjoyed this quest with Jason, and he's just like, yeah, man, this has been phenomenal, right? What I want you to do is I want you to send him a Centaur and a Minotaur, right? How about wait, hold on.
Yes.
A Minotaur riding a Centaur. Yeah.
Love it. Yes.
Right.
All the tars.
Right.
All the tars.
Carrying just a bunch of OG, the superpower Batman figures, and that old school Swamp Thing tree set. Dude, I had that. Right?
That was awesome. Yeah.
I had that. I remember you had that, and I looked, and I was like, I gotta type this in because I'm like 90% sure. And I looked at it, and I was like, holy crap, dude! I did. You can get it for like $20 on eBay, right? So you can hook
Wasn't
Jason
that a
up with
great
that.
toy?
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
You can hook it. I mean, that's used, not new. I don't know what it costs new. We didn't get into that. I didn't look that hard. I ain't gonna lie. Right? So you can at least get a used one for them pretty cheap. The Minotaur and the Centaur, that might be a little bit more difficult, right? But before you send them on their way, I want you to make sure that they got a bunch of Hershey bars, both plain and with almonds, right? And where is the last dang thing I'm looking for? Oh, and just a ton of enchiladas. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Excellent choice, Jason. Excellent choice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
if for some reason you haven't enjoyed this quest, I ask again, why are you here? What are you doing? Did you really sit for an hour and watch all of this and not enjoy yourself? Right? I mean, I would suggest doing something else. And I'm the guy that, it benefits if you watch this show. But even I will say,
we enjoyed.
Hey, don't
I
hate
loved
watch. Don't hate watch,
Yeah.
right? Hey, but hold on. Right, but sorry, I had to grab something real quick. But if you did, all right, you've watched this whole interview, and Jason's just like you're just listening to him, and you're like, I don't agree with this PhD having such and such so and so. It's got on my freaking nerves, man. Right? What you do? Should get you a bunch of them spiders from Lord of the Rings, right? Right? Yeah, soak them in cooking cabbage, like that water after the cabbage is cooked. You just pour it all over them. Right? Then you send them Jason's way to web him up and have some tiny spiders just crawl right up on his face. Start playing guitar. And don't worry. I'll be happy, because that seems like it'd be properly creepy, right?
Right.
Right. All right.
That seems about right. Yeah.
Right.
It seems suspicious.
Yeah. Don't worry. Well, the other spiders are just standing around, looking at him, staring at him. And then suddenly a TV drops down and they turn on steel and go, watch this. And then make sure he can't go nowhere, web his eyes shut. And that's just your eternity, man. And then they might start force-feeding cabbage, because I think they might have some spare somewhere from all the soup they made, but I don't know how it got poured all over them. That's besides the point. But again, that is only if you didn't enjoy the quest, man. I hope you all out there did, and you're not going to send that many spiders after Jason, because that just don't sound pleasant. Right? But besides that, what I want you all to do is just four more things, right? 1, make sure you go check that link in the description and check out Jason's stuff, right? 2, give it that thumbs up. 3, always get your comic on. And lastly, have a good night, y'all.
This has been the questionnaire.
Where's the link?
Thanks for checking out the questionnaire.
In the link below, yes?
I will drop it like it's hot.
That's another party.
It's cool, man. I love it.
The questionnaire. That is all.